The diner's bell jingled as a shivering boy crept inside, his worn sneakers squeaking on the floor. "No money, no food," the cook snapped, brandishing a ladle. But Clara, with a gentle nod, set a steaming plate before him. "Eat, child," she whispered. "No one starves here." Years later, a gleaming car rolled into town, and the boy, now a man, returned with a gift that stunned everyone. What drove him back, and what secret from those quiet meals changed a town forever? Willow Creek, Indiana, in 2005, was a town caught in time, its main street lined with faded brick storefronts, their awnings sagging under the weight of years. Dust settled in the cracks of uneven sidewalks, and the neon sign above Clara's kitchen flickered, one letter perpetually dark. The diner, a squat building with peeling white paint and large windows smudged with grease, was the heart of the town, or at least it had been, before chain restaurants crept into the outskirts. Clara Thompson, 46, ran the place with a quiet determination that belied her petite frame. Her hazel eyes, warm but shadowed by fatigue, and auburn hair, laced with premature gray, told a story of sacrifice. A widow since her husband's death in a car accident a decade earlier, Clara had raised her son, Ethan, alone, pouring her life into the diner to keep it afloat. Clara's kitchen wasn't much to look at. The linoleum floor was scuffed, the day. Red vinyl booths patched with tape, and the counter's chrome trim had long lost its shine. A jukebox in the corner, silent since the 90s, gathered dust beside a bulletin board pinned with community flyers. But the diner had two claims to fame: Clara's peach cobbler, a recipe passed down from her grandmother, with a crust so flaky it could bring tears to a grown man's eyes, and Clara's unspoken vow that no one, especially a child, would ever leave hungry. Every afternoon around 5 p.m., a boy named Lucas Carter, barely 13, would slip through the diner's door. Scrawny and hollow-cheeked, he wore a faded hoodie 2 sizes too big, its sleeves fraying at the cuffs. His dark eyes, framed by lashes too long for a boy, stayed fixed on the floor, as if meeting anyone's gaze might shatter him. He'd settle into the corner booth by the window, his bony frame barely filling the seat, and wait, silent as a shadow. Hank Grayson, the diner's cook, was a bear of a man with a graying beard and a temper honed by 25 years in greasy kitchens. He'd spot Lucas and scowl, his voice carrying over the sizzle of the grill. "Kids back again, huh? No money, no seat, that's the rule." Regulars, truckers nursing black coffee, retirees lingering over pie, shop clerks on break, would glance over. Some, like Jenny Harper, the diner's part-time waitress and a single mother herself, felt a pang of sympathy. Others, like Mr. Peterson, who owned the hardware store, muttered about freeloaders and bad habits. Clara would emerge from the kitchen, her apron dusted with flour, carrying a plate piled with meatloaf, mashed potatoes swimming in gravy, and a side of green beans. She'd set it before Lucas with a tenderness that silenced the room, then place a glass of lemonade beside it. "Eat up, honey," she'd say, her voice soft to preserve his dignity. "No one leaves my kitchen hungry." Lucas would nod, his thank you barely a whisper, and eat slowly, each bite deliberate, as if he were memorizing the taste. Some days, Lucas lingered after his meal, offering to mop the floor or wipe down tables. "You don't owe me a thing," Clara would say, ruffling his hair, which was always a little greasy but soft under her fingers. "Just come back tomorrow and keep growing." The townsfolk weren't so forgiving. Mrs. Eleanor Delaney, the II town librarian with a tongue sharper than her pruning shears, would lecture Clara over her tea. "You're running a business, not a charity kitchen. That boy's learning to live off handouts." Clara would smile, wiping the counter with a rag, and say, "Maybe, but I'd rather feed a child than turn one away." Lucas lived in a crumbling trailer park on Willow Creek's edge, a place of sagging roofs and broken dreams. His grandmother, Alma, raised him on a fixed income, her diabetes and heart condition eating up what little they had. Lucas's mother had succumbed to addiction when he was 6. His father was serving a 20-year sentence for armed robbery. The first time Lucas came to the diner, he'd asked for water, his stomach growling loud enough to turn heads. Clara had seen the hunger in his eyes, not just for food, but for someone to care, and slid a grilled cheese sandwich in front of him without a word. "On the house," she'd said, and that was that. Lucas wasn't one for words, but his actions spoke volumes. He'd fold his napkin into a precise square before leaving, or sweep crumbs from his booth with his sleeve. Once he left a single dime under his plate, its edges worn smooth. Clara found it while clearing the table and tucked it into her pocket, her throat tight. It wasn't payment, it was pride, and she wouldn't take that from him. "That kid's got heart," Hank admitted one evening, watching Lucas scrub a pot in the kitchen, his thin arms working with surprising strength. Hank, despite his grumbling, had taken to slipping extra bacon onto Lucas's plate or tossing an extra roll into his to-go bag. Jenny, who'd seen her own son, Tommy, go hungry during lean months, would sneak Lucas a slice of cobbler when Clara wasn't looking. "You're teaching us all something," she'd tell Clara, who'd wave off the praise. The town was divided on Clara's generosity. Some, like Pastor Reynolds, who'd known Clara since she was a girl, saw her as a blessing. "You're doing God's work," he'd say, dropping off canned goods for her to distribute. Others, like Mr. Hughes, the bank teller with a ledger for a heart, warned she was setting a dangerous precedent. "You're teaching kids to expect free rides," he'd say, adjusting his tie. Clara would shrug, her hands busy kneading dough. "I'd rather be fooled by kindness than regret turning my back." Clara's kindness wasn't limited to Lucas. She'd serve free pancakes to kids whose parents were laid off from the factory, keep the diner open during blizzards for stranded travelers, and slip extra biscuits into the bags of elderly widows. Once during a brutal winter, she turned the diner into a warming center, brewing coffee all night for those without heat. "That woman's a saint," Jenny would say, but Clara brushed it off. Just doing what needs doing. One stormy afternoon, Lucas left a crumpled note under his plate, written in pencil on a scrap of notebook paper. "Thank you for not making me feel like nothing." Clara found it while cleaning, her hands trembling as she read the words. She folded it carefully and slipped it into her apron next to the dime. She never mentioned it, but it became her talisman, a reminder of why she kept the diner's doors open despite the mounting bills. As years passed, Lucas became a fixture at Clara's kitchen. He'd help peel carrots, stack chairs, or shovel snow from the sidewalk, his quiet presence a comfort to Clara. She'd watch him grow, still thin, but taller, his shoulders a little broader, and wonder what he'd become. But when Lucas was 16, Alma's health plummeted. A stroke left her bedridden, and they moved to Michigan to live with an aunt. One day, Lucas simply stopped coming. "Told you he'd bolt," Mrs. Delaney sniffed, stirring her tea. Clara said, "Nothing," but she kept the note and dime in a tin box under the counter, her heart heavy with questions about the boy with the haunted eyes. By 2015, Clara's kitchen was a shadow of its former self. The roof leaked into buckets during storms, the booths sagged under years of use, and the stove's left burner worked only when it felt like it. Clara, now 56, felt the years in her arthritic hands and the ache in her lower back from decades of carrying trays. Her auburn hair was nearly all gray, pulled into a loose bun, and her hazel eyes, though still kind, carried a weariness that hadn't been there before. Ethan, her son, had settled in Chicago, where he worked as a graphic designer and pleaded with her to join him. "Mom, you've given enough," he'd say over weekly phone calls. "Sell the diner and come live with me and Sarah." But Clara couldn't let go. The diner was more than a business. It was her anchor, a place where she'd poured her grief after her husband's death, her hopes for Ethan, her belief that kindness could heal a fractured world. Hank, now 60, with a limp from an old knee, injury, stayed on despite the diner's shrinking profits. "This place is my home," he'd growl when Clara apologized for not affording raises. Jenny, who'd gone back to school for nursing, juggled shifts between classes, her loyalty to Clara unwavering. "Your family," she'd say, hugging Clara after a long day. Willow Creek had changed. A strip mall on the highway, with its shiny fast food joints and coffee chains, had siphoned customers from Main Street. Clara's kitchen survived on a dwindling group of regulars, old-timers like Pastor Reynolds, who still tipped generously, and a few truckers who preferred Clara's. Home cooking to burgers under heat lamps, bills stacked up on Clara's desk, and her savings, once a modest cushion, were gone, spent on repairs and unpaid utilities. She'd lie awake in her small apartment above the diner, crunching numbers that refused to balance, her faith tested by the relentless math of survival. One April morning, a letter from the landlord, a faceless real estate firm in Indianapolis, shattered her fragile hope. They were tripling the rent to clear the block for a boutique hotel and upscale shops. Clara had 90 days to pay the new rate, buy the building outright, or close. She sat in the diner's office, a cramped room with peeling wallpaper and a flickering bulb, staring at the notice. Her hands shook as she dialed Ethan, her voice breaking. "I don't know what to do, sweetheart." "This place is all I've got," Ethan urged her to sell. "Mom, you've done more than anyone could. Let me take care of you now." But selling felt like betraying everyone who'd ever found solace in the diner, every hungry child, every lonely widow, every weary traveler. Hank, overhearing her, on the phone, placed a calloused hand on her shoulder. "You gave this town a heart, Clara. Don't let them take that from you." She managed a weak smile, but despair clawed at her. The diner was her life's work, proof that small acts could matter. Now it seemed the world was proving her wrong. They opened the next day as usual, the routine a lifeline. Clara brewed coffee, Hank flipped pancakes, and Jenny chatted with customers, her cheer masking her worry. The town buzzed with gossip about the diner's fate. "Heard she's done for," Mr. Peterson said at the barber shop, shaking his head. "Progress waits for no one." Mrs. Delaney, ever the cynic, predicted Clara would run off to Chicago with her tail between her legs. Clara fought to keep going. She called banks for loans, but her credit was ruined from years of covering the diner's losses. She met with a realtor who offered a lowball price for the building, warning that developers were circling. "Take the deal, Clara," he said. "This town's moving on." She refused, her stubbornness fueled by memories of every plate she'd served, every life she'd touched. "This isn't just a building," she told Jenny one night, her eyes red. "It's where hope lives." Jenny hugged her. "It's not just yours, Clara. It belongs to all of us." The words were a comfort, but they couldn't pay the bills. Clara began skipping her own meals to save money, her frame growing frail. Hank noticed and started bringing her sandwiches, grumbling, "Can't have you fainting on us." Pastor Reynolds organized a fundraiser at the church, but it raised only a fraction of what she needed. The clock was ticking, and Clara felt it in every creak of the diner's floorboards. Meanwhile, in Seattle, Lucas Carter was building a life beyond his wildest dreams. After moving to Michigan at 16, he'd earned a scholarship to a community college, thanks to a teacher Clara had once convinced to tutor him after school. He'd studied computer science, graduating with honors, and joined a tech startup developing cybersecurity software. By 2015, at 23, he'd co-founded a company that caught the attention of a tech giant. When the firm was acquired for $200 million, Lucas's share made him a multi-millionaire. Success hadn't erased his past. He carried Clara's kitchen in his heart, the warmth of her voice, the weight of a full plate, the way she'd looked at him like he mattered. He'd kept the memory of the dime he'd left her, saved from weeks of scrounging, and the note he'd written, a child's attempt to express what she'd given him. In quiet moments, he'd search online for news of Willow Creek, hoping the diner still stood. One evening, while browsing news on his tablet, Lucas found an article about Willow Creek's redevelopment. The mention of Main Street stopped him cold, and his chest tightened when he read that Clara's kitchen faced demolition. Memories flooded back. The smell of meatloaf, the creak of the booth, Clara's hand on his shoulder. He sat in his sleek apartment staring at the city skyline and made a decision. The next morning he called his lawyer, a woman named Rachel Nguyen, and set a plan in motion that would rewrite the diner's story, and his own. On a crisp October morning in 2015, Clara arrived at the diner before sunrise, her breath fogging in the chill. Her joints ached as she unlocked the door, the familiar jingle of the bell a small comfort. She started the coffee, her hands moving on autopilot, and lit the grill, the hiss of gas a reminder of the day ahead. The diner was quieter, now with only a handful of regulars trickling in. Clara's smile, once a beacon, felt forced, her worry etched in the lines around her eyes. At 9 a.m., a silver SUV pulled up outside, its polished surface gleaming under the morning sun. It looked out of place among the rusty pickups and dented sedans on Main Street. Clara peered through the window, her stomach twisting. "Developers," she muttered to Hank, who was flipping bacon with a scowl, "come to measure for their fancy hotel." The bell chimed, and a man stepped inside, his tailored gray suit crisp against the diner's worn interior. He was tall, with close-cropped hair and a quiet confidence, his dark eyes scanning the room. A woman followed, her sleek black hair pulled into a bun, a leather briefcase in hand. The man removed his sunglasses, his gaze lingering on the cracked counter, the faded photos pinned to the wall, the empty jukebox. "Can I help you?" Hank asked, wiping his hands on his apron, his tone edged with suspicion. "Is Clara Thompson here?" the man asked, his voice calm but carrying a weight that stilled the room. Clara stepped forward, her apron dusted with flour, her heart pounding. "That's me." The man smiled, and something in his eyes, deep, familiar, haunted, sparked a memory. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Lucas Carter. Do you remember me?" Clara's breath caught. The mug in her hand slipped, shattering on the linoleum, but no one moved to clean it. "Lucas?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Little Lucas?" He nodded, a flicker of emotion cracking his polished demeanor. "It's been 10 years. Jenny, refilling sugar jars at the counter, gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Hank stared, his spatula frozen, bacon sizzling unattended. Clara steadied, herself against the counter, her mind racing. The boy she'd fed, the one with the too big hoodie and downcast eyes, was gone, replaced by this man, poised, successful, yet unmistakably the same. Lucas introduced the woman as Rachel Nguyen, his attorney, then asked if they could speak privately. Clara led them to the office, a cluttered space with stacks of unpaid bills, a flickering lamp, and a corkboard of Ethan's childhood drawings. She sank into a chair, her legs unsteady, as Lucas closed the door. He told his story, his voice steady, but laced with feeling. After leaving Willow Creek, he'd moved to Michigan with his aunt, who'd given him stability, but little warmth. A teacher, nudged by Clara's long-ago encouragement, had tutored him, helping him earn a scholarship to college. He'd studied computer science, graduated top of his class, and co-founded a cybersecurity firm that sold for millions. Now, at 23, he led an investment group in Seattle, his name known in tech circles. "But I never forgot where I came from," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "Or you. You gave me more than food, Mrs. Thompson. You gave me hope." Clara listened, tears streaming down her face. She'd always prayed Lucas had found a better life, but this, a millionaire standing in her crumbling diner, was beyond her imagination. "I'm here to make you an offer," Lucas said, leaning forward. "I want to buy this building, the entire property, and give you a lifetime lease for $1 a year." Clara gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Lucas, that's..." Impossible. He shook his head. It's not enough. You didn't just feed me. You showed me what it means to be human. This is my way of keeping that alive. Rachel opened her briefcase, revealing contracts already in motion. We're in talks with the landlord, she said, her voice crisp. They're motivated to sell, especially with our offer. Clara's head spun. Why not just give me the money? She asked, her voice small. Lucas smiled, a hint of the boy she'd known in his expression. Because this isn't charity. It's an investment in what you've built. But there's one condition. Clara braced herself, expecting a catch. What is it? Lucas's eyes softened. The name has to change. From now on, this will be Clara's place, serving hope since 2005. Clara's knees buckled, and she gripped the desk, overwhelmed. Lucas knelt beside her, his hand on her arm. You made me feel like I mattered. Now I want the world to know your name. That afternoon, Lucas called a town meeting at the diner. Word spread like wildfire, and by evening the small space was packed with locals, regulars, skeptics, even kids who'd once eaten Clara's free pancakes. Mrs. Delaney sat in her usual booth, her lips pursed. Mr. Peterson leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Pastor Reynolds stood near the door, his Bible tucked under his arm. Lucas climbed onto a stool, his presence commanding silence. 10 years ago, I was a kid with nothing, he began, his voice carrying over the crowd. Hungry, invisible, ashamed. But Clara Thompson saw me. She fed me, not just food, but belief in myself. He unveiled blueprints for a renovated Clara's place. Same cozy layout, but with new floors, modern appliances, and a roof that wouldn't leak. This diner will stay, he said, his gaze sweeping the room. Because Clara's kindness deserves to live on. He paused, his eyes locking on Mrs. Delaney. I remember everyone who called Clara foolish, everyone who said I'd never amount to anything. Mrs. Delaney's face flushed. She stood, her hands trembling. Clara, I was wrong, she said, her voice cracking. I criticized you for giving away food when you could barely pay your bills, but you were building something I was too blind to see. The room fell silent, her words a confession that hung heavy in the air. Mr. Peterson shifted uncomfortably, his eyes on the floor. Mr. Hughes cleared his throat but said nothing. Lucas gestured to a framed note on the wall, his childhood thank you, preserved beside the original Clara's Kitchen sign. This is what Clara gave me, he said, and now I'm giving it back. The crowd erupted in applause, some wiping tears, others reaching for Clara's hand. She stood, her arthritis forgotten, her heart full. Jenny hugged her, whispering, You did this. Hank, wiping his eyes with his apron, nodded at Lucas, a rare smile breaking through his gruff exterior. The renovation of Clara's place began days later, with workers descending on the diner like a swarm. They tore out the rotting roof, replaced it with sturdy shingles, and installed energy-efficient windows that let sunlight flood the space. The linoleum was swapped for polished hardwood, the booths reupholstered in soft blue vinyl, and the counter refinished to gleam under new pendant lights. Lucas oversaw every detail, flying in from Seattle to ensure the diner kept its soul. The jukebox was restored, now playing Ella Fitzgerald and Johnny Cash, and the bulletin board was reframed, its flyers a testament to the town's renewed spirit. Clara, initially dazed by the whirlwind, found her footing as the community rallied. Mr. Peterson, chastened by Lucas's speech, donated paint and lumber from his store. Jenny's son, Tommy, now a carpenter, built custom shelves for the kitchen, his pride evident in every nail. Mrs. Delaney, her cynicism softened, sewed curtains in cheerful gingham, hanging them with trembling hands. Never thought I'd be part of this, she admitted to Clara, her eyes misty. The grand reopening was set for April 2016, and Clara's place drew crowds from across Indiana. A local news story, millionaire saves diner that fed him as a child, went viral, shared thousands of times online. People drove from Indianapolis and Louisville to eat where kindness had come full circle. Lucas established the Hope Plate fund, ensuring free meals for anyone in need, no questions asked. He also endowed a scholarship program for Willow Creek schools, guaranteeing no student would study hungry. Hank, now head cook, took on a new role, mentoring teens from struggling families. He taught them to chop onions, knead dough, and plate orders with care. But more than that, he taught them resilience. "This ain't just a kitchen," he'd say, his voice gruff but warm. "It's where you learn to stand tall." Jenny, who'd earned her nursing degree, managed the diner's community programs, organizing free meal days, cooking classes for kids, and a weekly support group for single parents. "You showed us how to care," she told Clara, her eyes shining. Clara's place became a beacon, its story spreading beyond Willow Creek. Former patrons returned with notes and gifts, their gratitude a tapestry of small miracles. A man who'd become a paramedic wrote, "Your soup in 2008 got me through nights I thought I'd never survive." A woman, now a social worker, left a card. "You fed my kids in 2010 when I was too ashamed to ask for help. They're thriving because of you." Each note was pinned to a new board by the entrance, a living record of Clara's impact. The town began to transform. Inspired by Clara's example, businesses adopted her ethos. The bookstore launched a free reading club for kids, with cozy nooks and donated books. The grocery store started a food rescue program, delivering surplus to families in need. Willow Creek, once a town of fading dreams, found new life in acts of generosity. Pastor Reynolds called it Clara's Ripple, a wave of kindness reshaping the community. Clara, now 57, sat by the diner's window one evening, the new sign glowing against the twilight. Clara's Place, serving hope, since 2005. Lucas joined her, setting down 2 plates of peach cobbler, the scent of cinnamon filling the air. "You were right," Clara said softly, her voice steady, despite the tears in her eyes. "Kindness comes back." Lucas pointed to the diner's motto, painted in elegant script on the wall. "Feed the body, nourish the soul." "You taught me that," he said, his smile a mirror of the boy she'd known. The diner thrived, but Clara's legacy stretched beyond its walls. Willow Creek declared Clara's Day, an annual celebration where residents shared stories of her impact. Meals served, hands held, lives changed. Ethan moved back to town with his wife, Sarah, and their daughter, Lily, who learned to roll pie dough in the kitchen where Clara had built her life. "This is where love lives," Ethan told Lily, watching Clara laugh with customers, her arthritis no match for her spirit. As Clara's Place grew, so did its legend. National outlets picked up the story, and tourists flocked to eat where a single meal had sparked a movement. Clara remained humble, deflecting praise with a wave of her hand. "I just fed people," she'd say, but to those who knew her, she was proof that one act of kindness could echo across decades. Focuses on the broader impact of Clara's Place on Willow Creek and beyond, 2016-2018. Explores how Lucas's Hope Plate Fund and scholarship program transform lives, with stories of recipients, e.g., a teen who becomes a doctor, a single mother who opens a bakery. Details Clara's growing role as a community leader, mentoring young entrepreneurs and speaking at local events, despite her initial shyness. Introduces a subplot about Hank's health scare, prompting Clara to train a new generation of cooks, including Tommy, who finds purpose in the kitchen. Highlights the town's continued evolution, with new community initiatives, e.g., a free clinic, a youth center, inspired by Clara's example. Ends with a national award for Clara, which she accepts reluctantly, insisting the real heroes are the people she's fed. Set in 2020, reflects on Clara's legacy as she nears 62, with the diner, now a regional landmark. Explores Clara's personal growth, finding peace with her husband's loss and joy in her granddaughter Lily, who dreams of running the diner someday. Details Lucas's monthly visits, now a ritual, and his decision to fund a Clara's Place franchise model, spreading the free meal ethos to other towns. Introduces a subplot about a skeptical journalist who visits to debunk the diner's myth, but leaves transformed. Writing a feature that goes viral. Culminates in a massive Clara's Day celebration, with former patrons and strangers sharing stories and Clara reflecting on her life's work. Closes with Clara and Lucas at the counter, sharing cobbler, reciting the diner's motto and looking to the future, followed by the call to support the channel. Clara's story proves that a single meal, a single act of kindness, can change a life and a town. Has someone's generosity ever touched you? Share your story in the comments or type HOPE if you believe small actions build lasting legacies. Subscribe for more tales that show every plate served with love can rewrite the future, and support our channel to keep these stories of hope alive.